Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order, please. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Budget and Finance Committee for meeting for March 2nd, 2020. I'm Paul Krikorian, joined by my colleagues, Mr. Price and Mr. Blumenfield, and we're ready to begin today's meeting. We'll go ahead first and take multi-item speakers, but before we get to that, I just wanted to let some of our visitors who are here who don't frequently come to Budget and Finance Committee know that we do not have translation available at this meeting because no one called ahead in advance to request it. But in the future, if you simply call the clerk's office, we can make arrangements to have translation available. If there's somebody that you have with you who can offer translation while you speak, that would be great, and we'll give you extra time to do that. Okay, so we'll go ahead and take our multi-item agenda speakers, and we'll start with Mr. Previn.
Are we doing just the multiple items?
You know what? I'm sorry, Mr. Previn. Forgive me.
Yeah.
It's okay. Go ahead and do your multi-items now.
And not the general public?
Not general public just yet. I'll get to you in a minute.
Okay, well, for starters, I take note that there's an error in the bicycle case, which is item number 2, because what you have is you describe it as a collision, but in fact the guy's bicycle got caught in the sidewalk and then he went over and got hurt. So that's inaccurate. And in terms of the case George Abraham versus City of Los Angeles, obviously you know, and I know, that this is a matter that deals with the very public comment rules that I'm using today to address you under the First Amendment of the Constitution. And the City Council in September of 2016 made some radical changes to those rules. Hale, Mr. Hale, that's very rude. I'm speaking to the chair. Sir, I realize that you're busy.
Speak to the agenda. Totally Don't speak to my staff. Speak to the agenda, or you'll be out of order.
No, sir.
Speak
thank you. I am speaking. I am speaking.
We don't have a dialogue.
Okay,
you
good.
Speak to the agenda, or you sit down.
Restore my time. Restore my time.
I will not do anything of the kind.
Then let me continue, sir. You made draconian rule changes that put a group of people, described as the multiple item speakers, people like myself who care about more than one subject, in a isolated group that was then provided shortened time and inhibited rights. You also deny regularly, when you made these rule changes, the right for members of the George Abraham lawsuit. Again, you're interrupting my time. You have to put back some time, sir. You can't speak into my time. Put 15 seconds back, sir. It's totally inappropriate for you to be asking me what case it is.
Are you going to sit down, or are you going to speak to the agenda?
I am seated down, and I'm talking about the case. You don't know what case it is. Don't talk during my time.
Speak to the agenda or sit down.
I'm speaking to the agenda and sitting down at the same time, sir. That's something that I provide as a service. Now, the reality is that this is very bad, and you know that the Brown Act is your worst. The reason why this is the day before Election Day, that you are hearing this case about the Brown Act with George Abraham, a man who was hit by a FedEx truck, sadly, but wanted to bring this case forward and couldn't. And the reality is that you violate the Brown Act on a routine basis. As you know, at the appellate court recently, I took you and the City Council, Mr. City Attorney, right up to the appellate court and had you thrown down on a pattern and practice of violating the Brown Act. So this is the same thing. And once again, you've interrupted my time. You've denied access, and you do it all. This is the legacy of Mitch Englander. It is an insane set of rules, and then you jump up in every meeting and say, so sorry that the public is here speaking, because you've tortured them with silly rules.
I've never said I'm so sorry the public is speaking. I do take issue with some people who abuse their right to free speech, which I don't accuse you of doing. But certain members do. So sit down, please. Sit down. We're not having a dialogue.
You took my time.
Sit down. We're not having a dialogue. One more time and you're gone. Is Mike Greenspan here? He's not. Mike Greenspan has waived his time. All right. We'll go ahead and take Mr. Herman next, followed by Mr. Spindler. Speak to the agenda items.
Muy bien, puto. Muy bien, puto. Estoy diciendo que nolgal le tripen fall, pinche pendejos. Es lo que es un cuidado cuando estás caminando por no te caigas en el piso, porque un pinche jodido como usted no quieren pagar para el carrón ton chicharrón. Pero Pero tú sabes mucho, pendejo. Mira cómo te hablas con la gente. Puro fregar, de fregado, cabrón, mendigo. Pero de todos modos, mendigo, baboso. Mira, le voy a decir algo de la verdad. Usted es un chingado mendigo.
Speak to the agenda,
El
Herman.
automóvil es un lugar donde uno puede fregar cuando le cae el carro. Pero siempre no hay carros. Sigue hablando cuando uno está diciendo que estoy hablando de los derechos de nosotros, babosos. Hay muchos babosos. Hay güeros, mojados, negros, japoneses, pero
You're
uno,
not speaking to the
pinche
agenda.
pendejo que habla cuando la bicicleta uno se cae, es el Simón de un cabrón pendejo así.
So the truth behind George Abrams, as you heard, when he got killed by a FedEx truck, is a similar situation when Dean Ferguson's son was killed by the city of Los Angeles, which I allege is criminal, and the same way D.A. Jackie Lacey's husband pointed a
This is not
hand
on the agenda.
revolver at someone
Not
at
the
the
agenda.
porch
You're disrupting.
and told him, the tree limb will fall. Please get off the porch. But no, the nigger held a gun out the door, say, get
You're
off
out
the
of order.
fucking
Have a
porch.
seat.
Get off the
Return to
porch, you
your seat.
jackass
Mr.
motherfucker.
Herman is disregarding my instructions. Please have him removed from the meeting for disrupting the meeting. Mr. Herman, you're gone. Spindler. You don't get warnings with me. You're out. Spindler, you're next. Spindler, you're next. Put his time up. Let the time start running.
You should let the extrication take place.
I appreciate your advice, Mr. Previn, but please don't give me advice. Sit silently and listen. Mr. Spindler, have a seat. Start running this time. Start running this time.
Sí, muchas gracias, sus judíos y puto negros. Número uno, en el LeBron, una puta negra pone en colisión en 4047 Peachy Street con el ciudad y tiene una liabilidad con muchos problemas. Los calles son muy peligrosos porque muchos negros inside en este bicicletas.
speak to the agenda.
Como número dos, sí. Y número dos, como Price, un negro que tiene bicicleta no tiene carro. Como la esposa, por ejemplo, de Bloomfield.
Just speak to the agenda items.
No tiene, necesita bicicleta para trabajo, tiene accidente puto. Then number 3 and 4, and now we get to number 4. George Abrahams. Now what he tried to do, he tried to sue the city because you bunch this fucking shit together in this agenda for 5 fucking items. You only give us an easy pinchy 2 minutes to talk about this fucking thing. We cannot talk about it logically. So you go to your attorneys get paid off by fucking Jews, and the fucking Jews give the money to the lawyer to drop the lawsuit, so we continue to have violation of our First Amendment fucking rights. And this is why we need to stop this shit and stop the bunching. But no, because you fucking Jew lawyer motherfucker need your money. Fuck the Jews, fuck Jackie Lacey, and fuck you.
All right. I'd like to go next to, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and go next to our item number 5, please.
Item number 5 is the Sierra report relative to the proposed capital and technology improvement policy to replace the existing capital improvement expenditure program funding policy within the city's financial policies. The Information Technology and General Services and Public Works and Gain Reduction Committees approved the above matter.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Bernice Hollins, Office of the CAO. I'm the Chief of the Municipal Facilities Group. The item before committee today is the proposed capital and technology improvement policy that is proposed to replace the city's existing capital policy. That policy was adopted in 2005 as part of the former financial policies that were also recently updated. And this was the policy that established our current 1% annual investment level. As a half-page document, the current policy does not provide adequate details on our existing practices. So as part of the new proposed policy, we are providing greater transparency for our existing practices as they pertain to project prioritization criteria, our annual development process that will continue to follow the city's budget calendar, and also the government structure for implementing and managing these projects. In terms of the proposed changes, we are recommending to add a technology component that would be responsive to multiple directions received from various council offices. We are also recommending, as part of the report recommendations, increasing the current 1% annual investment level to a minimum of 1.5%, which is the actual percentage that we have implemented as part of the current 2019-20 adopted budget. We are also recommending establishing a 2% annual target each year. Unlike the existing policy, we did not include this percentage as part of the policy document itself. That is because we anticipate fluctuations on a year-by-year basis based on the city's financial conditions, but also because we intend to bring back in later years specific investment targets once we collect a full inventory of our capital needs, and we would develop specific metrics and funding objectives for the individual asset classes. We will also be resuming publication of the 5-year annual plan. This will serve as a very significant planning tool to reflect how many resources basically we need to utilize to implement our existing projects. As reflected in Attachment B to the report, for our known existing projects that currently exist, those projects would require up to $5 billion in investments over a 5-year period. That 5 years began in the prior year. This is currently year 2 of that 5-year cycle. Prior to the policy being considered by council, we do have minor technical adjustments that we'd like to reflect in a revised document. These are largely just style considerations. And of course, as part of that revised document, we can incorporate any additional changes that this body has for the proposed policy.
Okay. Anything to add?
Just introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Kay Ha with the Office of the City Administrative Officer. Any questions you may have, we'll be able to answer it, and we also have staff available to answer any specific questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions, members? Mr. Blumenfield.
Great, thank you. I'm thrilled we're moving in this direction. I think we maybe need to go a little further, but I've been, every year in the budget process, I always talk about the need for reflecting our digital infrastructure. And so I'm glad that this starts to get us in that direction. As you said, it kind of reflects where we're at now in our budget. But, you know, given all the claims and about our failed infrastructure, and, you know, I think our number needs to go higher. I know we talked about this in previous committee where this was at, you know, I know we're setting the goal of 2%. I'd like to see that go higher. I'm a big believer in the back end and on infrastructure, but I'm happy that we're moving forward in this direction. The other piece of this that I'd like to see worked in as we move in the future is reflecting the ROI a little bit in terms of what these expenditures, how they're actually saving us money or time. Like with police, we typically, when we make a technology investment, we're able to show that it's going to get this many hours of officers back on the street for this investment. With our digital infrastructure or technology infrastructure, generally speaking, we're doing these things that they're going to save us, either going to save us money, which is most of the time, or they're going to save us something else of value. And I'd like that to be captured better in terms of what the ROI is, and different than a traditional financial ROI, because we can have a different kind of return. But I can see that as this policy. I don't want to slow this down. I think this is great. I want to move this forward, and so I'm fully supportive, but I'm just putting the seeds there because I would like to see.
Mr. Spindler?
Sorry.
One more disruption, this will be your only warning. One more disruption, a phone sounds, anything sounds, you're out.
Distracted by the computer making all the noise by Mr. Spindler there. But anyway, my main point was just that I'm glad that we're moving forward on this. I've been a big proponent of capturing the technology infrastructure into our goals, but I would like to see these two changes as we move forward, which is increasing the goal and better reflecting the ROI.
Thank you, Councilmember, and we certainly agree with that. This is just a first step in a larger process. Like I said, we suspended several years ago due to our own working capacity constraints publication of the 5-year, and that has been that you essentially haven't had the planning resource that you need to make some of the decisions that we need in terms of how these projects are prioritized. But we also agree that even increasing the 2% target that we're suggesting, that will not be sufficient to provide the resources that we need to address the current level of deferred maintenance that we have for our existing assets, as well as to provide the investment level that we need to develop new capital assets in support of city services. And we are fully committed to going forward over, once this policy is implemented, in developing metrics because we do feel that it's important to reflect what is being accomplished under these programs, but also to set specific objectives for each asset class and how the quality level that we want to maintain these assets. There are other municipalities, I didn't mention the infrastructure that we're going to need to develop for this, but there are other municipalities that have invested in various software that assist in making funding prioritization decisions, but that's required. You're required to first set an objective of what do you want to achieve in terms of your yards and shops, what kind of grade rating do you want to get for your swimming pools. And so once we define these metrics, the objectives that we're trying to define, and we get the electronic resources that we need, then we'll be able to bring these back to council and have a more dynamic, comprehensive program than what we have currently today.
Are there any municipalities that you've looked at that are kind of the gold standard or what we should aspire to in terms of this policy?
We did do benchmarking for this about 4 years ago, and many of the municipalities at that time were in a similar situation as us of knowing the direction that we needed to go towards, but no one had actually arrived at that finish line. Based on a conference that we attended this year, it seems that Washington, D.C. has made significant headway, so we do intend to revisit what they've been doing and to have direct discussions of seeing what elements, what best practices they have in place that we can implement potentially in the city of LA.
Great, thank you.
So just to be clear, this policy would not apply to the coming budget cycle, it would apply to 21, 22?
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Price, did you?
Thank you for the report. I'm extremely excited that we're moving forward in this way with a little more transparency and thoughtfulness. But I'm curious, you mentioned that I guess each department is going to be making requests or recommendations in terms of upgrades. And then I guess the CAO is going to determine yay, nay, or is the CAO going to be offering some overall kind of guidance that we need to be upgrading this, we need to be upgrading that? What's the procedure going to be?
So as I said, we're not going to deviate too much from our current process. One of the changes that we will have in our annual process, usually requests for new capital projects follows the mayor's budget letter. In this case, one of the adjustments that we've suggested is just for our continuing projects to get that input in at the beginning of July so we can just, sort of sort through those issues. But the new request for projects that have not been implemented, those will continue to follow after the release of the mayor's budget letter each year. And then from that, we're just taking this, the whole consideration process happens as part of the development of the annual city budget. So the CAO would continue to apply the prioritization criteria that we define in the policy. We would continue to make those recommendations to the mayor's office, and then the preliminary funding recommendations would be reflected in the mayor's proposed budget. Once that comes out, then all the information that we've provided as part of the mayoral portion, we would then provide to council prior to finalizing the budget for that year.
All right. The one thing that I was concerned about is not setting a floor in the policy, because Mr. Blumenfield has talked about this for so many years, about making at least a minimal investment in technology upgrades every year. And of course he's right. Of course that's what we want to do. And it seems to me that without setting that floor in the policy, we're missing the opportunity to ensure that that actually happens, because it's always the reason that we don't do that is because the priorities of the budget are always in competition with one another, and unless technology comes forward with its own constituency to advocate for it, it often gets left in the dust. And so I am really pleased that we're moving in this direction. I do think it's important to have at least some floor built into the policy itself, so that we're not in a position of just testing one priority against another and then having technology, get left behind or get put off for a year, and then a year turns into 3 years and so forth. So what I'd like to suggest is, and our existing CIEP policy, of course, has a floor. It's not necessarily an absolute floor, because there is the language in there that says to the extent possible, or whatever that exact language is. So I'd like to see, because this doesn't apply for the coming budget year, we have time to continue to work on this. I'd like to hold this in committee and ask the CAO to come back, try to work with some of the recommendations that Mr. Blumenfield just had provided about ROI and otherwise, and to consider inserting some numerical floor. And if you want to have language in there to couch it, that under certain circumstances, specified circumstances, there might be other alternatives with certain findings or something, that may make sense to have flexibility. But I think if you don't have some number in there, the policy is not really a policy. It's just kind of a hope.
So I just want to say that this was an area that we had a significant discussion on, even within our own office, of whether to include the percentage as part of the actual policy. And ultimately, we were just concerned that if we included an increase in the percentage rate, we were concerned that it might become an impediment to just moving the policy forward. And we didn't want to risk not being able to provide all the various areas that this policy clarifies, just to be stuck on the percentage. But as I noted before, we were planning to do some additional updates, insignificant updates to the policy, and we can, of course, go ahead and incorporate a percentage as the action supported by this committee. That's something that we can do in a very short turnaround time.
Great.
It doesn't necessarily need to hold up this process, because what we're trying to do is to get council action on this, understanding that the budget process is coming. We didn't want this to get held up, because we do need to have an adopted policy in order to do all of our procedural, updates, and to also prepare and know that we're going live in July. So if I could ask if we could just, like I said, make those incorporations, those changes. If we need to come back to this committee for that, I'm hoping that we can get onto the next, agenda for the committee, and hopefully avoid just being suspended for 2 months during the budget considerations.
Okay. Well, I do think we have time to think about this, but yeah, we'll make it a point to get on the earliest possible agenda.
Okay, we appreciate that, and like I said, we'll take care of the revisions.
Very good. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think that brings us to our closed session items. So I think what we'll do is go ahead and use the other room, if that works, because we have folks in the audience here. So let's just go ahead. And does City Attorney have preference as to priorities? We are back in open session now, and we're ready to take up general public comments. I'd like to call up Caridad Vasquez, Faustino Martinez, and Jackie Puentes. And do we have somebody who is going to?
I was speaking with the group, and she was going to interpret for the group. The lady
Primero voy a empezar.
Never mind, they just switched. Never mind. Her son.
Oh, great. Thank you.
¿Quiere decirlo en español primero? Luego le digo yo.
Buenas tardes, miembros de este comité. Mi nombre es Caridad Vázquez y soy vendedora ambulante impulsiva a esta campaña. No, este no es mi papel. Pues, acá está. Disculpe. Dile mi nombre. Mi nombre.
Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Caridad Vasquez. I am a street vendor in the city of Los Angeles. I'm here to support the legalization of street vending in the city of Los Angeles.
Estoy aquí pidiendo a este comité que aboguen por todos para crear el programa efectivo que ayude a emprendedores de la tercera edad y discapacitados y de bajos ingresos.
I'm here asking of you to support people that street vend that are in the they're senior citizens and
De bajos ingresos. Okay.
and low income. They want you to support the low income and the senior citizens that street vend.
Necesitamos un mensaje a la ciudad, apoyar a clase trabajadora inmigrante, mujeres. Es una decepción que sigan nutriendo 6 millones en forzar y no a educarnos a nosotros, los vendedores.
We need to send a message to the city of Los Angeles to support low income and immigrant women.
Porque habemos el 60% de mujeres de la tercera edad y necesitamos que nos apoyen a que sean los permisos un poquito más bajos porque no podemos pagar.
It is very disappointing that the city is investing $6 million in enforcement and not in education.
Gracias.
Gracias. Faustino Martinez, followed by Jackie Puentes, followed by Sandra Vieda.
Mi nombre es Faustino Martínez. Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
Estamos agradecidos por la ciudad de Los Ángeles, por los permisos que nos otorgaron.
We are very thankful for the city of Los Angeles for the permits they have gave us.
Por otro lado, estamos un poco molestos porque todavía nos siguen molestando a todos los vendedores ambulantes a pesar de tener esos permisos.
We are very enraged at the city of Los Angeles because we are still being bothered even though we have permits.
No sé por qué han invertido únicamente $350,000 para nuestra educación o para invertir aquí a los vendedores ambulantes.
So, you know what I'm going to...
Why have you invested only $35,000 for our program and only $6 million for enforcement in different places?
Y 6 millones que han invertido, lamentablemente, no es para un beneficio propio de nosotros.
Información, ¿qué dice ahí, oiga? Es que no lo leo bien.
Pero escucha para transmitir.
No está. There's different places with information that are not capable to give good service and good funding. We have our own investment. Ahí está, ¿no? ¿Es todo?
Le invitamos a que inviertan más en nosotros para la educación y así nosotros estar con ustedes, y nosotros siempre estamos con ustedes y queremos trabajar en unidad con ustedes.
Well, we are only asking you to invest in us so that we could keep street vending. And yeah, that's about it.
Please,
Gracias.
go ahead. Okay. Okay, gracias. It's okay, no, thank you very much, Rita.
Buenas tardes,
Buenas tardes.
miembros de este comité. Mi nombre es Sandra Villeda y soy vendedora en Los Ángeles.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Sandra Villeda, and I'm a street vendor in the city.
Estoy aquí en el nombre de todos mis compañeros.
I'm here on behalf of all of my colleagues.
Como vendedores hemos logrado que la ciudad nos reconozca como trabajadores.
As workers, we have been able to get the city to recognize us as workers.
Pero quiero pedirles algo muy importante.
But I want to ask you for something very important.
Queremos que la ciudad invierta fondos para el programa que funcione.
We want the city to invest funds so that the program functions properly.
$350,000 solo para educar y 6,000 millones para enforzar.
It's $350,000 for education only and $6 million for enforcement.
Esto manda un mensaje que quieren ustedes que el programa no funcione.
This sends the message that you want the program to fail.
Pedimos que el presupuesto destinen recursos para las siguientes cosas.
We want the funds to be set aside for the following items.
Permisos de bajos ingresos.
Permits for folks who are low income.
Para educación.
Permits for training and education.
Para la asistencia técnica.
For technical assistance.
Eso es lo que le pedimos. Gracias.
¿Y qué es eso?
Para alcance.
¿Qué es alcance?
Para que el programa funcione.
Oh, and additional funds so that the program can actually function properly. Thank you.
Gracias.
Gracias. Jackie Puentes? Jackie Puentes? ¿No está aquí? Okay. And Caridad Vasquez spoke. Yeah? Okay. Is there somebody named Juan? Juan D.A.? Okay. Was there anybody else that wanted to speak? ¿Es todo? Okay. Mr. Previn, please. Mr. Previn, please.
Thank you. It's Eric Previn. What a terrible disappointment that we weren't able to provide translation for this group. And let me just simply say that the string of violations of the open government rules that we've been enduring is going to be coming to an end. I know you've been diligently making an effort, but it has not been enough. And obviously with the installation of Council President Wesson, removal of Council President Wesson and the installation of Council President Nuri Martinez, we are looking for immediate change. I know that you were in the back room talking about George Abraham, but we don't see any form of settlement for this case because you have failed to uphold the basic integrity of public meetings by Avak, whatever his name is, Kewadian, putting papers up and then denying access. Stefan Faubel is essentially what we describe as a felon in the open government space because he simply overrides and alleges that it's not a substantial amendment, even though these substitutions and amendments, this endless amount of trickery behind the public's back is coming to an end. So good luck.
Thank you. Mr. Spindler.
So yes, anybody but Herb Wesson. No on the terrorist, Herb Wesson. But one thing I'm glad is that Albert Robles, the mayor of Carson, a trusted partner, is running against Herb Wesson. So yes, current price supporting Albert Robles is a great, great thing. Albert Robles is current price's former divorce attorney, and he did a real good job on fixing the mess that was involved in that sticky litigation. That's why that Albert Robles will always have current price's support, especially after they had to fix it. So again, get out there and vote. Herb Wesson for third place. Yes. Everywhere I go, Strephon Fable is everywhere. He was all over the place last week. He's everywhere. You have to pay this guy more money. Finally, fuck Paul Krikorian. Oh, thank you. It's good acoustics. But did you know that the mayor of Carson is currently...
There being no other business before the committee, we are adjourned.
Yeah.